The building applications on Bitcoin is not just about building the application itself from scratch. It's about building on top of what already exists. And to lead a panel discussion today with a few well-known Bitcoin faces, we have Brendan Lee. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you very much, Steve. So today we have with us Shashank Singhal from Codugh, James Belding from Tokenized, and Ryan X.Charles from MoneyButton. Now, these are three quite different platforms that are available for people to use on Bitcoin SV. And so really to get started, I'd like to ask each of you what it is that your platform does and what problems you solve for developers in basically about a minute. So if we could start with Ryan, please.
Sure. Okay. So I'm founder of MoneyButton. And so what MoneyButton is we describe it as a simple payment system. So the idea is to make it extremely easy to integrate Bitcoin payments into web applications. So we let you do things like accept payments very easily. So you can accept payments to your business if you're a merchant. But MoneyButton has a lot more advanced features too. So you can do things like make it so that your users can pay each other. You can make it so that people can make pay multiple different people at the same time. We have an integrated OAuth system, so you can have things like the user can log in and keep track of what they've purchased. We have a number of sort of advanced uses of cryptography inside MoneyButton as well. So you can even do things like encrypt your data and create digital signatures inside of Bitcoin transactions. So it enables a wide suite of different types of applications. So we would encourage people to look at MoneyButton. Basically, if you're making some type of web app that uses Bitcoin, MoneyButton may solve your problem and allow you to create things like social media, finance, and all sorts of applications on Bitcoin.
Thank you, Ryan. So jumping now to James, could you give us a 1-minute rundown on Tokenized?
Sure. Thanks, Brendan. So I'm the CEO of Tokenized, and what we're doing basically is focusing on taking commercial records, which the biggest part of that and the most important part of that is contracts and smart contracts, and really codifying them and standardizing them such that software can really automate a lot of the processes associated with the contract's lifecycle. Now, the heart of that and the most important use case we think is really in financial instruments. So today, most people are familiar with public securities, stocks, what have you. They got a ticker symbol, they're traded digitally, they're dematerialized. So we see there are significant improvements in that market, but we don't see that as the really compelling value proposition and the real revolution that's coming. And we really see the revolution in the alternative markets and the private markets, where you've got financial instruments that are essentially today just represented by a contract, a paper contract or a contract that's in a PDF somewhere, and software cannot make sense of it. And often the terms and conditions are fairly similar between these different instruments, but they're not codified. So the language that defines the rights of those terms and agreements and what have you are very, very different, but only different in wording. They're not different in spirit or meaning. So these types of elements can really benefit from being codified, and then have software use that to basically simplify the process, automate the process, allow people to actually understand what's going on better. And this is really, really important for developers because our framework makes it much, much easier to interact with these, and then let your wallets and other software that supports and interacts with it, you have something to work from that's standardized.
Great, thank you. And so jumping over now to Shashank, could you give us a 1-minute rundown on Codugh?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm one of the co-founders of Codugh. So Codugh is an API marketplace. So it's essentially a marketplace where people can buy and sell different sorts of APIs. And the difference is that it charges API consumers per call to use these APIs. So since the call of an API usually only provides a small amount of value, Codugh uses subcent microtransactions to allow for these per call exchanges. And modern APIs are usually offered for free because there's no good way for developers to extract value from their APIs outside of monthly subscription plans. And Codugh fixes this by allowing API consumers to pay for exactly what they use and no more, and allowing API developers to monetize code where this has traditionally been difficult and ineffective.
That's great, thanks. And sticking with Shashank and Codugh for now, I was wondering if you could tell us, before you came to the hackathon in Seoul, did you have any experience with blockchain technologies? And if so, can you give us a bit of background and let us know what your decision or how you came to the decision to support Bitcoin SV, and why you think it is the best choice for Codugh and your users?
Yeah, of course. So my co-founder and we've been interested in blockchain technologies since around 2016. During that time, we fiddled with several different chains, and I believe my co-founder Andrew even built a small project on Ethereum, but not one that he continued onwards. But we didn't build anything significant on the blockchain until the first BSV hackathon, which was earlier on last year. And we always believed in scaling for big blocks as a path forward. So it was first BCH and now BSV that we followed in a blockchain sense. So when the chain split happened, we had a few factors outside of obviously big blocks that we were looking at when we were support. One was being a dedication to a stable protocol, which BSV keeps touting and which we, as application developers, we deeply respect. And also, a lot of the names in the industry that we support and believe in the most went with BSV. So we saw it as a clear choice because of that. And I think if today you look at the two ecosystems, I think it's quite clear that we did make the right choice. Now, yeah, when you look at why BSV suits Codugh specifically, it's the massive scaling through big blocks. Codugh's user base scales up. Our on-chain transactions will scale exponentially. So we need a blockchain that can handle a large volume of transactions, and we've seen with various applications like Weather SV and Preve and a few others that BSV can really handle big time user transactions on chain. Low fees on BSV allow for microtransactions, which is obviously essential to our service offering. And as I mentioned earlier, a dedication to a stable protocol means we can be relatively certain that we won't encounter any big changes or struggles in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of what you said there is probably echoed by, the rest of the people on this call. Yeah. Okay. So jumping over to Tokenized, James, I was wondering if you could, how would you best describe what it is that Tokenized is solving for developers, and in what areas can they really leverage it to accelerate their projects?
Sure. So I think the concept of smart contracts has barely been touched in terms of where it needs to go to become a mainstream compelling product. There's much more to it than just code. And that's where Tokenized, I think our protocol really goes a long way. And we've made a lot of progress to taking it mainstream, in that we're starting to think about this in terms of what are the legalities of it? How does it interact with mainstream corporate customers who have real risks to manage on both the technical level as well as a legal level? There's jurisdictional risks. How do these things interface, right? And a lot of tokens and contracts today, it's a very different market and different set of rules and different experience for investors across different jurisdictions. So what we're really trying to do is we take script. So our protocol builds upon script. So everything you can do in script, you can do in Tokenized protocol, but then it builds upon it and gives it a framework that, again, as it codifies, standardizes the important parts that make it actually legal, that make it meaningful, that take it into a realm that mainstream users can actually digest and actually operate with. And another way to think about this too is when we really started thinking about the problem in the beginning days or the early days, the expressiveness of a smart contract system is important, but it really, really makes the interoperability very, very difficult when you start to get into edge cases and unique smart contracts and various different scripts. If you think about it from a wallet perspective, being able to interoperate, not only understand every type of smart contract script and what that really means in a legal sense as well as a technical sense, but then also being able to build a user interface around it and a way for the user to actually understand what they're doing is a very, very, very complicated process. And if you do that in a market where everyone's doing their own little thing and they're having different variations of how script is actually going to be implemented, they're going to run into a lot of problems, and it's going to need to be standardized. So we are just leading that way. We're basically trying to build a really, really simple as it can be, but expressive so that it really does make smart contracts a consistent interoperable protocol that everyone can use, and it can handle all types of contracts. So that's really what we think the value of our protocol is going to be to developers and obviously any business that uses it as well.
Great. I think that's something that's really needed, actually. Okay, jumping across to Ryan, I was wondering, can you give the developers listening some, you did go into it a little bit in your intro, but a bit more of an idea of some of the ways that MoneyButton can be used. And if you have any to hand, can you share maybe some of the usage statistics that you have around what's currently happening with MoneyButton out there at the moment?
Sure. So let me cover, first of all, some more advanced things that you can do with it and some of the applications that are using MoneyButton. So one of my favorite applications is something called Baymail, B-A-E-M-A-I-L. Baymail is a peer-to-peer messaging application that uses MoneyButton to basically allow users to send an on-chain encrypted message to another user. And so they were one of the first applications that used some of our advanced features around encryption and OAuth and everything like this. So let me sort of briefly explain how all this works and what this is so that people get a feel for what you can do with MoneyButton. So first of all, there was the idea that we want to be able to do something like send a peer-to-peer encrypted message to someone such that only the recipient of the message can actually read the message. So we want to encrypt data. We can also do all sorts of interesting things. We put it on chain. So by putting encrypted data inside of a transaction, you can have an immutable audit log of things that happen, which can be something that you want in messaging. So you can have two different properties that are pretty complementary. It can be both private, but also sort of provably have like a provable record of what actually happened at the same time. So you get that by putting encrypted data on chain. So MoneyButton has something we call the Crypto Operations API. Not only can you use MoneyButton to make a payment, but you can use MoneyButton, you can use the same keys that are being used to make a payment to do other sorts of cryptographic operations, including encrypt a piece of data, such as a message to someone, and then sign that piece of data, put that inside of a transaction and broadcast the transaction. So that's what Baymail does to create a peer-to-peer messaging application using MoneyButton. So that's very novel. So of course we called it MoneyButton. The idea is that to make it really easy to accept payments, but also do lots of other interesting advanced things like that. So Baymail is one of the more sort of advanced applications using MoneyButton. And there are lots of other applications if you think about it that you can build with this. And similar to Bitcoin itself, we're trying to build the tools that allow people to build whatever they want, and you can concentrate on your application. And we're trying to solve the wallet problem for people so that you can rely on the wallet to do what it needs to do, and you can focus on your application to make your application as good as possible. So around the statistics of MoneyButton, we've had more than 1 million button swipes, and we have something like approximately 150 active applications using MoneyButton. So yeah, that gives you kind of a feel for it. I think that we are growing as far as whether, I think what's going on right now in terms of the usage is we're still very niche. So I don't think that we've reached a mainstream audience yet. So this is something that I've communicated about the status of MoneyButton, but I think the entire ecosystem, I think we still have a ways to go to reach a genuinely mainstream audience. And so that's why we spend a lot of time worrying about user experience, because we want to make sure that ordinary end users can use this stuff. So that's sort of where our general direction right now.
Yeah, that's great. And I've got to say, I've been using PowerPing a little bit over the last few days, and the experience there with MoneyButton and tipping and all of that is very, I find it very smooth and really a great way to use MoneyButton, especially with holding all of that data in the payment channels off the ledger and allowing people then to choose whether or not they want to put that information into the blockchain. So I just wanted to ask, of all of the things that you've seen deployed on MoneyButton, which really has been, in your opinion, the most unique use case?
The most unique use case. Okay, so I would come back to Baymail again. I guess I'm sort of hyping up his project, but I like that one just because it was so advanced. So a lot of the applications were much simpler and didn't necessarily use all of these features that we created. So it's cool when someone understands the power that we're trying to give to the developer, and they make a really advanced application, because there's a lot that you can do with this that has still not been explored. And we want to, over time, flesh out the full API to make it so that you can do everything. You can't currently do everything that you would want with Bitcoin, but that's exactly the direction we're going in. So I think Baymail, again, I would have to say is the other one, but I can give some shout outs to some of the other applications. So you mentioned PowPing. That one is an excellent, innovative application. There's Twetch is a big one. There's City on Chain. Most of the applications are social, so they tend to use a combination of like basically let the user log in and then do something with the other user, like communicate or messaging and things like this. That seems to be the biggest use case. It's basically social media. But there are other use cases too, like there is a trading application, TrueDex. There's a long list of like very innovative applications. So anyway, I'll leave it there. But to answer the question, I like Baymail because it was an advanced application that used many of the advanced features that we created for something like that.
Yeah, shout out to Darren. He's really one of the top devs out there, I think. He's done some stuff for me and it's been fantastic. So jumping back to you, James, and Tokenized, I want to ask particularly about its use cases and whether you could give the audience some idea of the range of different applications that Tokenized can be applied to, and the quickest and best way for them to get into it and to start leveraging its capabilities.
Sure. So I like to think of a token as simply an ownership certificate. If that's, you boil it down to its essence, that's what it is. That's why it's useful in the context of smart contracts and what Tokenized protocol offers. So anything that has an issuer that was going to issue something of value that gives rights or obligations to another party or many parties, a token can be represented in the Tokenized protocol effectively. It is that versatile and it is that foundational. And even when you get to things like coupons or loyalty points or membership to a gym, these types of you could tokenize those very easily because they're effectively ownership certificates. They're commercially meaningful, but a lot of people starting to forget that they also still have terms and conditions, right? Even a basic gym membership is going to have at least a page, and it's going to tell you what those rights and obligations are all about, and what you can, how long it's going to last, expiry, all those types of things. So again, the framework that we provided makes that the really common themes and elements that are important to any kind of contract like that codify and standardize so that you can navigate them very easily. And what it does is it allows any kind of ownership certificate to be, not only have the benefits of being on blockchain in the sense that it's immutable, it's interoperable, it doesn't have political risk, it doesn't have jurisdictional risk, but it has all this other stuff that's never been seen before in contracts. It makes it a lot easier. So you could really, is anything you can think of that is an ownership certificate of some sort that gives the rights to a user of something, it can be done on a tokenized protocol, and it can be done fairly simply. The protocol is fairly extensible and there's a lot to it, but from a wallet perspective and from a use case perspective, you can narrow the features that you need to touch and the specification part that you need to actually interoperate with on your wallet to make it actually quite simple when you really boil down what you need to do on it. So from our perspective, yeah, any kind of asset idea you have, any ownership idea you have, we are open to it. We've got a whole massive list in the background that we haven't shared publicly that we're working on. But we're also basically, if someone's got an idea, they can come to us, they can post on our forum, come on Telegram, and we will work with them to define a structure, a set of fields that is flexible and allows for other use cases to kind of work off that same structure.
Great, thank you. A question now for Codugh. So based on my understanding of Codugh, you actually end up having two sets of users. You have the API writers and then the API callers. Can you describe for us the interplay between these two sets of users and how Codugh really facilitates this experience?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, Codugh operates as a marketplace, so it does involve those two sides. We usually call them API developers and API consumers. And on Codugh, API developers basically post and price their APIs, so they can put up any API that they own, and they can choose a price per call that API consumers would have to pay to use the API. Then API consumers can browse this marketplace for APIs that interest them. And then they can click into it and see information on how to call the API, what the API achieves for them, and detailed instructions on how to call and utilize the API to the best of your ability. And then after that they can call these APIs and benefit in real time. So Codugh facilitates this by providing, one, the marketplace, which allows API developers to advertise APIs and API consumers to browse through these APIs and choose the ones that they like, as well as understand what the APIs can do. Codugh also provides the gateway that sits between the API and the API consumer. So what this means is that the gateway, that the API consumer is only ever calling Codugh's gateway. They're never calling an API developer's API directly. So this gateway authenticates users on Codugh and also builds them in real time as the call is going through to the API. So on top of that, the gateway also collects logs and data on top of API calls, and that data is then displayed back to API developers, so they have a better understanding on how their API is doing and what they can change and what they can improve.
Okay, that's great. And can you give us a bit of direction on what the best way is for somebody to start using Codugh? I think you guys have opened up a bit of a private beta, but can you give us any sort of timeline around a wider release?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're in a closed beta right now, but you can still sign up to the waitlist, and we usually roll out a release roughly on a weekly basis. So if you sign up to the waitlist, you will over the next few weeks get access just through that. But when it comes to a wider release, we're thinking maybe 2 to 3 months in the future, once we get a good amount of testing done and we understand more what we need to improve to get the product out to our wider audience.
Okay, great. So jumping back to Ryan, so I think many of the people are familiar with the simplicity of MoneyButton and how easy it is to deploy them in the websites. And I think it's possibly, you could call it the simplest payment system on the internet today, pretty easily, I think. But could you give us, outline for us a bit more the advanced features that are offered and what they can be used for? You did touch on it a bit earlier, but I know there's more there, so.
Sure. Let me give you an example of one of the advanced features that goes beyond what you might think MoneyButton is capable of doing. So the name MoneyButton is designed to be really simple and to capture the essence of it, but it is more advanced than simply a button. So we created something called Invisible MoneyButton, which allows you to basically fully customize the user experience. So it's more than literally just a button. So what you can do is you can have the users basically log into your application, and they will grant you permission to spend automatically on their behalf. So this lets you do all sorts of interesting things. I mean, you can have video games where the user clicks around with any type of interface on the web. You can do things like automatically broadcast payments. So if you want to automatically write data to the blockchain, I mean, that is in effect a payment. You're paying the miners. So you can automatically write stuff like that. So you can have applications like a social media application or a game where the user's actions are being written to the blockchain. So you can really fulfill that using MoneyButton. So that requires, this uses our new Invisible MoneyButton API. It built inside of Invisible MoneyButton are all of the other features you can do with MoneyButton. So those are things like sending to multiple outputs, writing scripts inside the output. So you can do many advanced scripts. You can send to Paymail, so you can take advantage of all the features with Paymail. So you can bring in other wallets. So if other wallets conform to the Paymail standard, you can interact with those wallets as well. You can do things like track what the user does. So in terms of what they've purchased and things like this, using the integrated OAuth and signature abilities. You can even do things like single sign-in. So part of the philosophy of MoneyButton is to make it so that not only do we have good user experience button, but actually better user experience than what users are used to anyway. So the ability to sign into a website by just swiping MoneyButton once, for example. And that would be something where a user would actually create, they don't know what's going on, but they create a cryptographic signature to literally sign into a website. So that gives you an idea. So there are many advanced things you can do with it, and people should check out Invisible MoneyButton to know how to create advanced user experiences using the MoneyButton wallet.
Yeah, some of the ways it's being used are pretty amazing, and I just wanted to ask a little bit more. So, I mean, it's quite a different experience from how the typical web login works. Most people would be familiar with putting in a username and a password and then logging in. But with MoneyButton, it's very different. You simply swipe the button and you're logged in. Can you give us an idea of how this can keep user information secure, and especially considering the fact that the button acts as a completely in-browser wallet and is custodial in a way?
Yeah. So we are, from a business perspective, we are not custodial. The wallet itself is non-custodial, and what that means is the keys actually live on the end user's device. So our company does not hold the user. The keys are actually encrypted with a hash of their password that our company never sees. So what that allows us to do is the encrypted wallet is backed up to our servers. So anytime you log into a new device, it retrieves the encrypted wallet and decrypts it with your password. So the advantage of this approach is basically that our company isn't a honeypot of money or something like that. We don't hold the money. The money is held by the users. And those same keys, it's not just money. Those same keys are what you use to sign into it. So when you literally swipe MoneyButton, you're signing in, you're creating a digital signature to log into a website. That's literally what's happening is the keys are living on your end user device, and there is a digital signature that's being created when you swipe MoneyButton. So the way we keep it secure is just like that. I mean, this is, in our opinion, delivering on the vision for Bitcoin, which is that if the end user has the keys, you get all these benefits. You get, amongst other things, you get the security benefits of there is no giant like central point of failure having all of the money or all of the other data or anything like this. The end user data is fully controlled by the end user. So everything, and then what the developer can do though is you can still do it however you want to inside your application, but the idea behind the paradigm is that the user should own it. So they can use these technologies to encrypt the other data that the user has. So so long as people build that style of application, you can still make things centralized if you want to when you build an application. But we allow you to build applications that are completely, allow the user to properly and fully own their data. And that is why it's more secure. The data isn't in some central location somewhere.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. So jumping back to James for Tokenized, and with much of the world moving to remote or paperless solutions, can you give people a bit of a window into some of the ways that tokenized identities can be used to improve security and safety of user accounts and information?
Sure. So identities it's a really complicated topic, really, I think. So I think it's important to kind of lay down the foundation here. So I think identity, I don't think we're going to have a single source of truth for identity ever. Like you're a physical person, and the records that support who you are come from various sources and can be attested to from a variety of ways, right? A lot of electronic methods coming. So today we've seen a rise in eKYC, which is like what you see with the neobanks and a lot of just modern banks and stuff in general, Coinbase, all those types of exchanges, where they basically take passports, physical papers, documents, proof of residence, and they take a scan of it. They do some algorithms, AI on it, and they determine the legitimacy of it. And they kind of validate that you are who you say you are. And they tie that to some public keys that you provided them or they provided you to operate and do business with them. And they've essentially got a database that connects that to it. So we think that there's a bunch of things that can be improved with not only tokenized protocol, but just the blockchain itself and how this can all play out in this new, more remote, more digital world. And a lot of it comes down to sort of what Ryan was saying too, is the non-custodial component to this, right? You've got the users being able to manage their own keys, and those keys being distributed across millions of clients or billions of clients around the world. So there's no centralized honeypot, but you still need to have the likes of passports, driver's licenses, other types of certificates is really what they are, issued by authorities who do some kind of process. So you can take a token that represents an identity like that, like it's not really an identity, but it's a certificate that goes towards building identity, and you can issue it to a user's public key so they can control it, but you still have an authority that controls that to some degree as well. So they can revoke it, they can confiscate it, they can set the terms and conditions around how that's managed. So that's a really important component of it. The other component to the identities, which I think is a powerful thing, and it's a slight tangent, but I think still relevant, is identity oracles. So this is something that we've conceived and built into the protocol. And what it is essentially specialist companies out there that act as eKYC verifiers. So they take those documents and what have you, and they basically manage and ensure that the people who say they are, with respect to public keys, are linked to a identity that's been verified through all those documents. So with that is some interesting things come about. So with smart contracts, you can then set terms and conditions that are enforced by smart contracts through software, dependent on identifying characteristics that are part of data. So like the age of a person, the location, their status, whether they're an accredited investor, whether they're not, and anything else you can really do. So you can then therefore have a tokenized level where you're dealing with contracts, where you're dealing with the ownership rights of things. You can have terms and conditions that are built and centered around identities, with these identity oracles actually providing attestation of certificates to go along with it. So there's a few different angles there that I think are really, really important. And another important part is how blockchain is really going to play a role in the security component. So along the line of there being no honeypot, I think that's really, really important, where you think about ransomware today and companies that have databases that are privately owned by themselves coming in and corrupting that data, or if you have a certificate authority, that all that data can be called into question, so to speak. But when you have a blockchain and immutable ledger that records all that and timestamps that, you can actually know for certain where the certificates are valid and where they're not. And again, that all lends to a more secure, more robust system where identities can be used to affect their will in commercial matters, in terms of personal matters, health matters, and ultimately, I think just a more robust, better, more resistant kind of system overall.
Awesome. Jumping now to Codugh, and the last couple of questions here. So I wanted to ask, most API marketplaces, they've got fairly convoluted subscription plans, and I think this is mostly due to the overhead that comes with processing online payments. Can you give people an idea of just what's possible in terms of API call pricing with Codugh, and how you guys are going to price your delivery of the service?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you're definitely right that that mostly APIs currently revolve around monthly subscriptions, and that is largely because processing online payments is so difficult and so expensive to begin with. So pricing in Codugh is based on microtransactions. So calls between from API consumers to API developers can be as little as half a cent currently on the platform. So it's sub-cent, and that will continue to decrease as we further optimize the platform. At the moment, when it comes to pricing our own part of the offering, at the moment, as part of the closed beta, we're not actually pricing, and we're letting our early testers use the platform for free. Moving forward, we'll be taking a small percentage fee off the top of each API call. So as they go through to the end user, we'll be making a multi-output transaction. So to take a small piece of the fee off of it as each transaction goes through. I don't hear you, Brendan. I'm not sure if that's just me.
Oh, sorry. Yep, that's my mute button didn't quite turn me back on again. So, my last question for today, and I just wanted to see. So it's easy to see why MoneyButton is MoneyButton, and why Tokenized is Tokenized. But Shashank, why is Codugh Codugh? Is there anything behind the name?
Yeah. So every time I'm asked this question, I always wish I had some exciting story about how it relates to me and society as a whole. Unfortunately, it's not that exciting. So as you know, Codugh was born during a hackathon. So when we were building it out during a hackathon, you don't have hours to contemplate the perfect name, because you don't have hours. So we were looking through what we were doing is we were looking through available.com names that were relatively short and simple. And we had a few candidates. We were like, oh, this is great. Then we saw Codugh. And since we're Australian, it's Codugh. It's pronounced the same for us, Codugh, as Coder, Codugh, right? So we're like, oh, this is great. It's applicable. It relates. What we didn't account for is that the rest of the world doesn't pronounce it like that. So everyone gets really confused, and that's a problem. But yeah, no, as my co-founder says, it's just quirky enough that we still enjoy it. So I
love the name. It's great.
I really like it. I think it's got zip. Okay, that's it from me. I know that Steve Shadders had a few more questions that he wanted to ask in the last 10 minutes or so that we have today. So, Steve, if you want to join us.
Hi, everybody. So I've got some questions from the audience, actually, and we've got exactly 10 questions and exactly 10 minutes. So I'll ask you to try and keep the answers to about a minute, if I've got my math correct. So Marco asks, he's got a question for Ryan. Do you expect to have tokenized-based tokens within the MoneyButton wallet to use as payments?
Yeah, great question. So the vision for MoneyButton has always been to ultimately have fiat currency tokens inside MoneyButton. So tokenized will allow us to do this. So somebody will have to create like a actual fiat currency backed token for that to ultimately work. But we certainly want to integrate token technology inside MoneyButton itself for that reason, as well as countless other reasons. So all the usual applications for MoneyButton. The way we see this is MoneyButton should be basically where the user's keys are. And so we want to provide the functionality necessary in order to enable every type of application that requires usage of those keys. So tokens are a giant portion of this. And I think that what will probably happen is it'll be the primary use case ultimately. With respect to timing and things like, I don't want to say anything about like a timeline for going to have tokens in MoneyButton, but that is definitely a part of the vision for MoneyButton.
Okay. So the next question, I think, is quite topical. It comes from Stein, I think from Norway, if it's the Stein I'm thinking of. And it's for you, James. Is Tokenized working on e-money?
Hey, Stein. Yes, we are very hard. That's the main first phase for us. So we're going after licenses to allow that to happen. We've developed a white paper that we submitted to the Bank of England that gives them a full framework with every concern that they have, every possible question answered, and a solution for it all. So behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of work that we haven't shared publicly, but we're going, like, that is the main focus right now, is laying down that foundation for proper e-money, eventually going to be issued by central banks. And we have a plan how to get there as well. So we have a private market solution that will eventuate into what we hope to be actual central banks issuing and controlling the smart contract. We've also developed a system to allow for identities to be like, so basically AML and KYC compliance to be enforced to comply with the laws that they need to have for these e-money to be actually be e-money, but also to do it in a way that open source wallets can still interact with these e-money without having to be a regulated entity or even have a license. So there's a lot of components to this, but we've really thought carefully about all this, and we're just driving hard towards getting it done. We'll see how long it takes. Like, we've got some obviously timelines in our head and things that we're working to, but there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the regulatory side of things and getting mainstream corporate customers comfortable with all of it.
Okay. And we've got a question for Shashank here for Codugh. So it says calls to APIs can probably have very low values. Are you going to use pay-per-end calls or payment channels or some other mechanism? I think they're referring to, you know, API call that might be 1,000th of, or 1,000 calls per cent or something like that, where the cost of the call is actually lower than a transaction fee.
Yeah, definitely. Payment channels are definitely on the roadmap, and that's part of the optimization of our platform. So when it comes to, like, one good example is sure, like you mentioned, when there's 1,000 calls per cent. But even if you're making 1,000 calls in a small period of time at all to an API, no matter how much that adds up to, payment channels are still valuable because that still saves you a lot in network fees sending through a single transaction rather than many. So when it comes to APIs, specifically APIs that are called a lot in a relatively short period of time, or that we can assure that will be consistently called by users, payment channels will definitely be implemented to optimize that fee.
Okay, so we're going to jump back to Ryan. I had thought this might have been a tongue-in-cheek question, but I actually think it is a serious one. So it says, UX question: if it's a button, why can't I press it? And I think they're getting at the decision to go swipe versus press. Was that a UX thing, or?
Yeah. Okay, good question. So, you know, MoneyButton is somewhat famously not something that you press, it is something that you swipe. So we started with the name, but we wanted to make the best user experience for pressing the button. we realized that swiping was actually a better user experience in the general case. The reason for that is you want to basically visit a new application and not accidentally send money. So if it were simply something that you pressed, we wanted to make it where the user is much more deliberate about what they're doing while still making it very easy to use. So a swiping action ended up being that, because it's very hard to accidentally swipe MoneyButton. You would only do it if you intend to actually send a payment. So it really is a user experience thing first and foremost, and that's why it's a swipe.
Okay. I've been curious about that one myself. The swipe for free button, though, I wonder if that might have an alternative user experience at some point in the future. But I'll leave that one for you. I won't make that a question. I've got 3 questions left here, but I'll start with the one that is probably one for everybody here. Which is, do you see a future where a key pair is issued at birth, which will be the root of a hierarchy tree for each person, or perhaps a set of them with additive biometrics? So perhaps this is a key that's actually biometrically derived that you carry through your whole lifetime.
Who are we starting with? Should I answer first?
Well, yeah, let's start with Ryan.
So, I mean, my opinion is both yes and no. I think that probably we will see increased usage of cryptography, and we'll see, yeah, you'll probably have keys issued at birth. However, let's not equate keys and identity. That doesn't mean your keys are you. It just means it's useful to issue keys right away. I'm not sure that they could be a part of a hierarchy, and what will probably happen is you could lose your keys and it's okay, because there are other keys involving multi-sig and threshold signatures and things like this, where your parents, your hospital of birth, your government of birth, and things like this can give you new keys if necessary. It would be something where we have a system similar to what we currently have with something like a birth certificate, but where we just add cryptography into it to make it a little bit more secure. But we're not gonna assign some permanent key pair at birth, because, well, you can lose your keys, you can be hacked. And so there's got to be a way to change them out, just like there currently is with birth certificates and passports and things like this. So that's how I personally see that playing out.
Mm-hmm. Shashank, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Ryan said. And in general, my understanding of keys is, you never want to have a single set of keys that sort of controls everything. So when there's a key pair at birth, then your entire life you're reliant on this single key pair, and you could get hacked, you could lose it. It's sort of if there's a really high value, a billionaire you're going for, it's a single target that everyone will go for, and you need to be able to switch out those keys to an extent. But there can be a relationship there to biometrics, how it generates new keys over time depending on your biometrics, and you can regenerate those when you want in a different format, perhaps.
Sure. So, I mean, one common form of biometrics is fingerprints, and I've often said fingerprints are a password that you leave copies of all over the place. But that's not to say that they're not useful as part of a multi-factor authentication scheme, for example. They certainly can improve the user experience whilst adding a degree of security. James, what do you think?
So we are driving towards that vision. We believe that to be the case. However, is every person going to have one set of keys their entire life? No. People are going to lose them like everyone else says, and there's going to be ways to deal with that. Insurance, business processes, like authorities having keys for you to get you out of the shit if you do lose your stuff. But I don't believe the biometric component is important to the generation of keys. I don't think that has to be part of the equation. But like Shatter said, I think biometric is really, really important to the multi-factor component when you're managing wallets and security. So.
Do one more question, but there's just a quick comment here. Someone's just said that the swipe is great and it's incredibly satisfying. So there you go. Your UX research was right about at least one customer, Ryan. So last question is for Codugh, Shashank, and just quickly, have you built the whole platform from scratch, or do you rely on other services like Culinaria, etc., for some parts?
So we obviously, we built most of the platforms from scratch, but when it comes to services, we obviously use MoneyButton's brilliant BSV library for many of our functions. We use BitSV as well for our gateway. We use we obviously have to communicate with miners, so we communicate with what's on chain at the moment for some of it, and Tal for others. other bits and pieces of our services. So we need to use parts of the ecosystem here and there, but the platform itself has been built from scratch.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll have to wrap this up there, and it's time for a few closing comments for this first Bitcoin SV DevCon. Thanks to the Bitcoin Association.